afternoon. I'm going to be sharing with you today about listening skills. And in the first slide, if you look at the first slide, it says you can't, if you don't listen, you can't hear. If you move to our next slide, it's the introduction. And my name is Ronald K. Lyde. I am an associate pastor with New Covenant Baptist Church in Norwalk. I currently work for the County of Riverside Department of Mental Health. My title is Behavioral Health Specialist 2. I'm in the Masters of Human Services program with a focus on health and wellness at Liberty Online University. And I'll be speaking and sharing today about listening skills. If you look at the first slide, listening skills, and you see the dog, the basset hound with the ears straight out, and he asks us the question, are you listening? In the next slide is intercommunication skills. And it says intercommunication skills is an interaction between two or more people in an effort to talk with one another. But before we can communicate with others, we have to be able to be effective listeners. This is an important area because our behavior shows if we're listening or not. Our communication can go bad if we're not using good enough skills. And when you look at the picture at the bottom, it's two men talking, they're businessmen, and the gentleman says, my wife said I don't listen to her. At least I think that's what she said. So that lets us know he's not using his listening skills. My overarching goal is to use the Peterson Talk Listener card so that I can listen better and be able to establish, first of all, who's going to talk first, and then letting the person that is most bothered talk first while I remain calm, listen to everything, and it'll stop all the misunderstanding in the communication process. Next, Peterson states real listening gets us inside each other, and there seems to be something in such human connections that touch and change us. He says when you're listening to another person and using your effective listening skills, you connect with that person. So he's letting us know the more effective listener we are, the more we connect, and there will be no misunderstandings in communication. As far as my work history, I've worked in the mental health field for over 15 years, and I've been a head behavior specialist for a non-public school. I've ran a crisis team. I was the head of the crisis team for SED youth, emotionally disturbed youth. And then I worked as mental health worker for the County of Los Angeles Department of Probation, working with incarcerated youth, and currently as a behavioral health specialist too for the County of Riverside in the Department of Mental Health. Each of these positions involve one important element, which is being a good listener. And using empathetic listening skills, being an effective listener, has helped me to support all of my clients and link them to community services and resources. In the next slide is basic listening techniques. You have a dog looking at the monograph, which was the signature picture for RCA. Peterson gives us 4 basic techniques, or just some techniques to help us with our communication skills. First, he says to acknowledge, use words, tone, and body language to indicate it's okay for the speaker to talk and that you're listening. Repeat accurately, which is paraphrasing in your own words. Repeat it and let the listener know that you are understanding. Whose feelings are they? Do not let your feelings take over the conversation. Make sure that you identify that the feelings belong to the speaker. And then play detective. Ask questions, ask them to repeat so that you can make sure the communication that you're hearing is what they're saying. Barriers to effective listening skills. 2 important barriers for me in my life is, first of all, I have that flat brain emotional theory that Peterson talks about, and that's letting my emotions become part of the conversation and cloud my judgment and make me judgmental and defensive, which can ruin communication. And then secondly, I have to learn to take turns in the communication process. Peterson says using that talk listener card helps alleviate a lot of problems. And the example that I give in the slide is that when I'm having conversations with my wife and she says something I don't like, I won't necessarily let her finish. I'll actually jump in, cut her off, which causes her to get upset, and then I'm not letting her talk first when she's usually the most bothered. And Peterson says I have to give her the chance to speak. I need to listen calmly, and that'll improve the communication between us, and there'll be less misunderstandings and arguments. The next slide is listening deeper. Listening deeper means listening deeper increases our understanding of what the person is saying and what we can give, and so that we can give the proper response. It moves us towards more satisfying relationship. We develop trust, intimacy, and more personal sharing. Strangers becomes friends, and it connects us on a level of feeling and spirit. When you move to our next slide, it says When do we listen? And it's got a person with her fingers, when we don't listen, I'm sorry, it's got a person with a finger in her ears, and the guy's basically yelling at her, trying to get him to hear her. And it says, when we don't listen, we get flat brain syndrome. As Peterson talks about this again and states that when we have flat brain syndrome, we are not able to pay attention to the talker. That the symptoms of flat brain syndrome are hearing is skewed. People with flat brain syndrome basically don't listen. Peterson states people with flat brain have crushed eardrums and simply can't listen. And at the bottom, you'll see a picture of a gentleman talking to another gentleman, and you can tell he's not listening to him, and he could care less. And then the four goals to counter the flat brain syndrome. First one is reduce emotional disturbance. Don't let emotions consume you where you can't listen. Clarify thinking. Don't be judgmental. Folks can't make good decisions unless they can think clearly. Increase self-confidence. When people are upset and confused, their self-confidence gets shaken. If you listen with respect and don't take over their problems, you'll encourage them to have self-confidence. Then the fourth one, build supportive friendship. When people are muddled, they feel alone, which makes any problem seem more daunting. Listening builds friendship, so they don't feel so alone. When they sense a friendship connection, they find new strength and courage to go on. In the next slide, the talk listener card. Peterson states that the talk listener card forces us to observe the roles we play, in conversation. Using talk, the TLC helps us to take turns in the conversation instead of letting the discussion slip into misunderstanding and arguing like two street fighters. Develop effective listening skills. Dr. Klein suggests that the following type of listening is the best listening, which is empathetic listening. And if you look at the slide, he gives a description of it. But basically, he's saying that with empathetic listening, we're not disagreeing with the talker, we're not agreeing with the talker, but we're listening to hear the talker's point of view so that we can understand and that we are not being judgmental. In the next slide, Peterson feels that using the TLC is a good intervention because it'll identify whose roles, who's talking first, who's listening, who's sending, who's receiving. And the target that's the most bothered should talk first so that there will be no flat braining and less misunderstandings. In the next slide is a picture of a kitten talking to a big mastiff. And the mastiff's looking at him like he's listening to him. And when you talk about my plan of action to improve my listening skills, in the next slide, it gives some things that I'm going to do, and it says, be other-directed, focus on the person communicating, follow and understand the speaker as if you were walking in their shoes. Listen with your ears, but also with your eyes and other senses. Be aware that non-verbally acknowledge points in the speech. Let the argument or presentation run its course. Don't disagree or agree, but encourage the train of thought. And in the last slide, you see a happy face with a thumbs up, and it says good listening skills will help with better intercommunication skills. The more we practice using listening skills, we will build supportive friendships and long-lasting relationships.